to the double shot with your favourite cousins, James and Alex Fitzgerald. James tries to hijack my intro, flying into the danger zone.
Don't tease me with it. You've seen it.
I can't get it out of my head. I'm flying into the danger zone everywhere.
Nice.
And let's face it, every room I enter becomes the danger zone because I'm entering. Holy shiitake mushrooms. That movie is good. It's in my top 3 now, cuz. And
How
the first
good.
thing I want to ask you off the bat, because I know how much you love it and now your enthusiastic way of this movie has carried into my now enthusiasm for Top Gun. What is your call name?
So, I'm glad you asked. And you texted me this over the weekend, and I thought, finally, someone's asked me what call name do I go with. So, I guess, first of all, I'll start with the ones that I didn't go with. So, initially my thinking was...
Christ, you've come with a whole list.
My thinking initially was, goose, rooster, duck. And then I was like, nah, duck's a bit... doesn't sound...
Pigeon.
No, so I'll let that one go. Then I thought maybe Maverick. I was like, what's like a synonym for Maverick? So I had like Rebel or Bohemian. And I thought, nah, it just doesn't have that ring to it.
Okay.
So then I moved on to Iceman. I thought Iceman, Hangman, something man. And I thought, Wingman. Then I thought, but that'll get confusing in the air because they'll be saying Wingman and they're probably not talking to me. So I thought, well, Wingman's probably not going to work. So I'm left with 2. If someone has taken my first call name, my runner-up would be Shadow because they just don't see me.
Okay. I like that.
Yes. My winner
Yes.
is Nightmare because that's what I am to the enemy. I'm a nightmare.
Whoa! I am actually very impressed.
I've had a while to think about it.
You know, for many who don't know you, I'll explain. James is your run-of-the-mill, happy-go-lucky, really nice, very placid, relatively like not timid or introverted,
Just
but
a great citizen, really. Yeah.
just a law-abiding citizen. So for you to come out with Nightmare, far out. There's a little demon inside of you, I reckon.
What have you gone with?
I'm not going to run everybody through how I came through and what I came up with, but I've landed on one we know and love because it's so relevant and it's Slingshot.
I
just thought that's a great call name. I was token Slingshot because I said something about our economy slingshotting out of COVID.
Which it has.
And for some reason, I said that in like May 2020. For some reason, it caught on. Everyone in the office calls me slingers. And I just thought Slingshot in the fighter jets is badass, but compared to Nightmare, it's pretty safe.
Are you not entertained?
Are you not entertained? How good is that? Anyway, that's
by
amazing.
the way, if you're listening and you're a big fan of Maverick or Top Gun, send us your ideas.
Oh, yeah.
Love to hear some good call names.
My next plan is to transition the whole company, everybody, into our JLF games at the end of the financial year into call names only. So we just basically all have one name each, and it's kind of badass. I'm not sure if we'll get helmets.
News team, assemble!
Producer Nick has figured out how to put in all of these flavoursome
absolutely upped
bits
his
and bobs.
game too.
Yes, I know. Anyway, let's move on from Top Gun because we could talk about it all day. You could talk about it all day. Where do you want to go next? Do we want to talk about
Let's
banks?
talk about the fact you've got a little bit more money than you did last month.
Well, not quite yet. Not quite yet.
Not quite.
Okay, so we've all got the letters. You know, your interest rates are increasing on your home loans.
How depressing are they? Yeah.
Yeah, I know. It is a bit, but then you run the numbers, you put them in your spreadsheet, and you're like,
I know.
Well, whatever. But on the good side, Macquarie sent me a letter, and I'm thinking, here we go. They've bumped it up again, but they've bumped up my savings interest rate. It was 0.35, and it has been for the last 2 years. It's gone to 1.5%. So that
absolutely
in my bank
rolling in
account.
it.
Yeah, so that whole $2,000 I've got in the Macquarie bank account that I have, I'm copping. I am copping 1.5% interest. The Milky Bars are on me.
What's that?
Not that they're
that means what you take home? Is it $300 a year. Not too bad.
Look, it's a new pair of sneakers, Cuz, and I know you love running the sneakers and jeans at the office. The sneens get up.
It's actually
Jerry Seinfeld for your troubles.
My maths is no good here. What is that? $30. $30, isn't it? 1.5%.
It's $300. $300.
Okay.
Wait,
I don't
is
think
it?
it is.
No, I'm not sure.
Anyway,
yeah, 100%.
hey, let's talk about
no, it's right.
Let's talk about the 4-day work week. There's a few companies in Australia trialling the 4-day work week. Love to
That's
know,
right.
as JLF's resident annual leave savant, what are your thoughts on the 4-day work week?
Firstly, Your Honour, I'd like to plead the fifth and actually not plead the fifth. I'd like to defend myself, Your Honour. I've got like
Alex
300 annual.
Fitzgerald.
Yeah, thank you. I was out Alex taking leave Fitzgerald, and then COVID happened, and now I'm gonna. And by the way, I've nearly been here 10 years. I'm coming up long service.
Wow.
I'm not even 30 years old, and I'm coming up long service. Is
Tell you
that
what.
just? Oh, I don't even have long service to take. I've used it all over the. I've stretched it out over the last 10 years. Anyway. Yeah, so basically the 4-day work week, this is not a new thing. It's kind of been a global thing run by a guy, what's his name? He's here somewhere in my notes, Andrew Barnes. He runs a not-for-profit called the 4-day week global. And basically it's got a very much a lifestyle spin, but also it's basically better for the climate because we're not rushing around using transport, driving our cars, yada, yada, you get it. Essentially, in the US, thousands of workers at 70 companies have started the pilot last week. So in Australia, we're going to also roll it out with about 20 companies. The essence of the 4-day work week is simply you have the exact same pay that you do today. However, you work 4 days only and you are expected to essentially have a 100% productivity. So in your 5 days, you might have a bit of water cooler chat, sit down, have lunch in the lunch zone, shoot the shit for a little bit. No, 4-day work week, none of that. You are working 9 to 5. Obviously, you get to eat, but it's not as, cruisy. So you're expected to get your 5 days done in 4 days and you get exactly the same pay. I think it's very interesting, Cuz. I'd like to get your notes on it as well. What do you reckon?
So it's the same pay, but for 4 days work.
Yep.
Look, I think the reality is in some industries it probably works. In some it won't.
Yeah, that's true.
Would I like a 3-day weekend? I guess it would be good for the novelty. Maybe I don't know. I've never done it. Yeah.
You don't even have a normal weekend.
I sort of like the fact that the weekend feels like it's so valuable because you've only got 2 days. So does it diminish the value of the weekend by having the 3 days? Maybe not. That's one theory. But I would have thought for certain industries where they work big days and they're sort of not a product of the hours, I would have thought 4 days works. For lawyers and people who charge by time, I couldn't see it working. They'd have to be 5 days.
That's true. I mean, what they're saying now is your 9 to 5's gone on your hybrid workers and people sort of don't work the 9 to 5. They work when is convenient. So maybe they'll work till 3 p.m. and then they'll clock back on at 7 and do 3 or 4 hours work after their kids have gone to bed. Do you know what? I reckon if I fell into the 4-day work week, I'm comfortable not doing that. That's okay. I think I'd end up taking it on like a working hobby. Like I would end up sort of trying to find another small side hustle where I could do it out of sort of pleasure, if you will. Like I enjoy it in some capacity, but then I sort of try to monetize it. I think that's where I would end up going, Maybe I'd make some lovely soy candles.
That makes a lot of sense. I'd like to think I'd do the same.
Yeah.
Hey, let's talk about rates. It's on everyone's lips at the moment. Interest rates are going up. I'm looking at the UK and the US because they're ahead of Australia.
Yes.
Australian interest rates today, or the cash rate rather, is 0.85% for those who don't listen every week. Australians pay roughly 2% more than that on their mortgage, so roughly 2.85% today. The US and the UK, they've been pushing their rates a little bit longer and sooner than we have. And the UK this week increased their interest rate another 0.25% to 1.25%. And the US, they went even harder, increased their rates by 0.75% up to, they have a range over there of 1.5 to 1.75. Either way, more than double, slightly more than double what the Australian cash rate is today. And my understanding of it is this. I think you've got to look at the unemployment rate and the inflation rates. So in the US, inflation is about 8.6% and the unemployment rate is 3.6%. In Australia, we're at 5% inflation, 3.9% unemployment. The big one, though, in the US is they've got 11.4 million job vacancies. Wow. Now, there's 333, it's a big tongue twister, million people. It means nearly 3.5% of their population today is the equivalent of job vacancies. So they're really struggling to fill jobs. By comparison, in Australia, we've got about 400,000. It's about 1.5% of the Australian total population. And the UK is slightly ahead of us at 2%. So I couldn't see us increasing rates as significantly and as quickly as the US and the UK because our inflation and unemployment rate and job vacancies are all a little bit lower. Now, that could change, but I don't see that happening today.
I went to a lunch yesterday. I'm not gonna talk about this too much, so don't panic. But went to a lunch yesterday. My broker invited me, and
Don't panic.
one of the chief economists.
An economist lunch?
Yeah.
Oh, now I'm panicked.
Yeah. Woo,
Jeez.
Well.
How long did it go for?
Ironically, so are the economists. But anyway, they were basically saying that look, in many ways we look to the UK, we look to US, see what they're doing, and sort of roughly calculate Australia being about 5 to 6 months behind them. But I guess they try to sort of get ahead of it, regulate. But they kind of said everything that we talk about on this. So we're basically economists. But you've got to laugh, cuz they get up. There's two of them. And they both start this way. Well, I'm concerned about three things. And then they list off everything they're concerned about. And we had questions at the end, and all I wanted to do was put my hand up and say, are economists ever not concerned? Because I'm thinking, fuck, this guy must just have the biggest therapy bill at the rate at which no, seriously, they're always concerned.
I am salty.
They really must. And I get it. It's their job. But damn, living a life of concern. We're concerned when the market's going up. We're concerned when the market's going down. And by God, you'd better believe it, we're concerned.
Yeah, it'd be a tough home life, wouldn't it? You'd be sort of
absolutely wouldn't marry an economist. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, they'd always be forecasting rain. They'd be packing jackets to go everywhere, raincoats.
Honey, what would you like for dinner? Well, I'm concerned.
Oh, geez. If we got any economists that listen, reach out too. Probably not.
Not anymore.
Immediately regret this decision.
Cuzzy, we love our bread, we love our butter, but most of all, we love Warren Buffett. And we love his wisdom.
You were absolutely busting to do the intro to this little segment
I've got
here,
a snoogie hanging out my nose.
And that's what I gave you the intro. Okay, anyway, keep going. Okay, yes, we love Warren Buffett.
We love Warren Buffett's wisdom.
A friend of ours sent a collation of some of his best and most famous quotes over the weekend. We shared it with each other. I've picked my favourite. You've picked yours. You start. Kick us off. What was your favourite of the Warren Buffett quotes that we got
You've thrown to me? Well, he says a lot of funny stuff. Like he says things like, you don't want to be caught naked when the tide goes out. I love that. I think it's so funny. But
Amen.
That's not on his wisdom. That's not on his wisdom. My favourite one, and he talks about on buying quality. So usually he's talking about stocks because that's his vibe. He actually doesn't love property. Go figure. Anyway, I can also relate this to property. Most people get interested in stocks when everyone else is. The time to get interested is when no one else is. You can't buy what is popular and do well. Zinger.
Ooh, sage wisdom. I
Zinger. What's your fave?
I loved one that's probably a little bit non-PC. Well, no, I don't think it's non-PC, but
Come
anyway, I'm
on.
going to run with it.
Do it.
It's on having patience. And Warren Buffett says successful investing takes time, discipline and patience. No matter how great the talent or effort, some things just take time. And this is the zinger. You can't produce a baby in 1 month by getting 9 women pregnant. True that.
He's my boy!
And by the way, just to close out, one for our economist friends who may or may not listen. Predicting rain doesn't count. Building the ark does. Like that one from Warren as well.
He did say that. Cuzzy, let's transition over to a little bit of property happenings in the last week or so.
Yep.
We talked about this like last year.
Huge
New South
news.
Wales, not probably. What was I even saying? New South Wales, the most expensive property in Australia at the moment, and they are
Median house price $1.4 million for those listening at home.
Smokachinos. But everyone knows that in Sydney. You know, Sydney, Greater Sydney, out in the west as well. 50K's out. It's bloody expensive. So about a year ago, it must have been just before the new financial year. I can't remember when, but they brought in a new guy.
Dominic Perrottet.
Dominic Perrottet, yeah, but what's the minister?
Perignon.
I don't know. Dom Perignon, your favourite guy. He took over the other chick, Gladys.
Whoa,
Gladys
Berejiklian.
Thank you, which we know and also loved. Anywho, I butchered that. So basically, when you buy a property, you pay stamp duty, and obviously it's a percentage of the purchase price, which with a 1.4 median is an absolute whack in New South Wales. So under the new property plan, first home buyers will have the option of paying the upfront cost of stamp duty and taking the whack, or they can pay a small property tax payment per annum of, interestingly, $400 plus 0.3% of the land value of the property. And this is available on all homes valued at less than $1.5 million. Interesting.
It's huge, and I believe it's been something that's been an initiative of Dominic Perrottet, not something that Gladys Berejiklian ever floated. So I think it's something that he's been really strong on. And what it means is on $1 million home, you would typically pay $40,000 because none of the first homeowner incentives extend beyond $800,000 in Sydney. You're not getting a lot for $800,000. So $40,000 on the one hand versus $400 plus 0.3% of the land value. So on $1 million home, you'd expect the land value to be about, call it what, 600,000, give or take. It's an assumption.
Yeah, maybe so.
That would be $2,200 a year that you would have to pay. So you either can choose to pay $40,000 up front or $2,200 a year, which will increase over time as the land value increases. And that's how the government are justifying it, is that they will probably collect more than $40,000 if the average homeowner holds that home for the average that homeowners do. I will say, though, that the announcement is Tuesday evening. We're recording Tuesday morning, so we don't know the details yet. You'd imagine that if you sell within 5 years, you've probably got to pay back a part of it or make some sort of adjustment out of your settlement proceeds.
Geez. Well, I think they also factor that the average homeowner owns their home for about 7 years. But you're still not collecting your whole $40,000.
No.
I find it interesting because and by the way, premier was the word that I just couldn't figure out before.
I am the numbnuts of numbnuts.
I am a numbnuts, and I'm afraid to admit it. So it's interesting because a premier and a state government get a 4-year term, right? So they're not getting that instant sugar hit of the stamp duty in their budget. They're actually getting it over time. So it's a very long-term play that, they are hoping to perhaps see through a couple of terms. In the ACT, they've actually already introduced this model. So they've got basically, once you buy a house in ACT, you can nominate whether you pay stamp duty or you pay land tax. And from there, that house is then either one or the other. Whereas New South Wales will differ by, new purchaser. So not exactly new. Now, cuz if we go to the absolute antithesis of New South Wales, the other end of the spectrum from the most expensive state in Australia over to Queensland, where we talk specifically about the new 1,200 social and affordable homes that the Queensland government are going to deliver there in partnership with Brisbane Housing Company and the Queensland Investment Corporation. Your backyard. Tell us more.
Yeah, so those two entities are Queensland government owned, effectively. The Queensland Investment Corporation is a big fund that invests the super money of government employees. And what they're doing is they're pairing up to deliver 1,200 homes that the government will build, own and rent out as affordable housing.
Smart.
It is aimed at dealing with what is probably one of the lowest vacancy rates that Queensland's ever had. It's less than 1% and not looking like it's going to solve itself anytime soon, because we've also got record interstate migration, more than 30,000 people a year coming into the state. So
Crazy.
It is a way. It won't certainly go a big way to solving the problem, but it will make a little difference. So that is off the back of the New South Wales governments and Queensland governments both announcing their budget this week. That's why we're hearing about these initiatives around solving the affordability problem, because all governments at the moment dealing with a massive challenge from their constituents, which is the cost of either buying and or renting a property.
I think it's huge, cuz, and I really sincerely hope they deliver this. They've put $2.9 billion in funding towards it, and that includes $1.9 billion over the next 4 years for all of this new growth. Yes.
Correct. And I was going to say, the first stage is 600 homes. It's going to cost $250 million, which means that it's 600 homes, which are going to cost just under $420,000 to build. I do wonder, though, and I don't know how social housing works. I know that you have someone who has delivered some speeches on it at the Urban Land Institute.
Not social.
Oh, not social. Okay.
Nah,
so
different ball game.
for $420,000, it's a big cost per house for the government to own. I do wonder if it would be better used to support developers like they do in the US, where they actually give developers cheap funding or they reduce their headworks if they keep a certain amount of the properties and rent them out to low-income renters. But, it's better than nothing.
Perhaps across the social and affordable, the affordable will have that subcategory of particular person where they will pay a rent. It'll just be less than the sort of private rental market. Very interesting. We will definitely keep tabaroonies.
Last thing, Chermside and Redcliffe is where the first projects are happening for those Brisbane-based people. Chermside and Redcliffe. You could Google it and see where they are.
Housing hit 10 trillion buckettoonies. So basically, cuz
whoa,
these are catching me off guard, these little sound bites. We started this podcast, was floating around 8 trillion. We went up to 9 trillion and now we're at 10 trillion, and that's over like 2 and a bit years. But we've risen 221 billion in the first 3 months of this year. We are up 1.8 trillion over 12 months. No surprises there. 56% of Australian wealth is tied up in housing, and 66% of bank lending is secured against housing. So the old saying, cuz, safe as houses, safe as residential houses. And I'd just like to note there that everyone goes, oh, scary, but remember, and we've talked about this before, our debt on that $10 trillion is somewhere around 2.1 trillion. So our loan to our value ratio is 21%. We're actually relatively cashed up. We're cashed up and we are sitting on our biggest assets, which is our own home. So provides us shelter, but also an amazing investment. So amazing there on the residential side. Are you ready to flick over now to the industrial side of things?
Yeah, definitely. So there was probably the biggest deal that we love our deals, and we love to talk deals when they're announced. One of the biggest deals that I've seen lately was a $61 million sale in Truganina. So Truganina just on the outskirts.
Wild West, baby.
The Wild West, big, fast-growing area in the west of Melbourne there. Goodman Group has sold 3 brand new industrial warehouses to Frasers, who's a Singaporean-based company. And what's interesting is they sold on a sub 4% yield or cap rate. So I thought it might be a good opportunity to explain the yield, the cap rate, and then another term that gets thrown around a lot is the WALE. And so the WALE on these properties was 6.5 years.
What'd you call me?
No, not you. Not you. No H in this one. WALE. And maybe I'll start with that one because that one is the one that's probably not well known.
Never
and what
heard
it
of a WALE.
is it's the weighted average lease expiry. So oftentimes you might buy an industrial or commercial property where there's multiple leases.
Yes.
And so what will happen is they will work out the weighted average lease expiry, which is basically just figuring out when do the leases expire in the building. But what they do is rather than just working out the average across them all, they look at what they weight them according to their area or the rental income. Normally it's the area because the rental income is the same depending on the square metre rate.
Yeah.
So they'll look at, if you've got a tenant with 2,000 square metres with a lease expiry date of 10 years, you've got one tenant with half of that space, 1,000 square metres, and it's 5 years, the bigger space will have double the weighting in terms of the overall calculation. There's a little formula that sits behind that. You want to talk to yield because I guess that probably cuts across residential, industrial, commercial, almost any type of property.
I don't have a definition in front of me, but the yield is your rate of return on your purchase price. So we talk about it very simply in property. You buy, I don't have my calculator, but essentially you buy a house for $500,000 and you figure out your rental return over the year. Say it's $25,000. I'm guessing that puts you around a 5% yield, somewhere around there. Which is a very strong number. So that your yield is your return on your purchase. But there's also, your cap rate or capitalisation rate.
Capitalisation rate. And that effectively is the inverse. All you do is you work out the rent, divide it by the cap rate, and that equals the purchase price. So it's effectively working out it's the yield used in a way to work off the rent to figure out the price that gets paid. So the yield and cap rate interrelate in that sense. They more or less mean the same thing. It's only the property folk who might try and confuse everyone by talking about them in different terms. You can often see that things buy at a cap rate of 4% or a yield of 4%. They're often used interchangeably.
And obviously, if they've bought it the lower the cap rate they've bought, the more they've paid in that sense. So it's really interesting. And when people say they bought at a cap rate of 3%, basically they bought at a price where they're getting a 3% yield, and you're like, oh, there must be something else going on here because that's tight. Tight like a tiger.
No, particularly when interest rates are nearly 3% today. Okay, so there we go. Can't say we don't try and teach in these podcasts. So hopefully that made sense to all of our loyal listeners.
You're the master. I'm the student.
Yep. I'm just so thrilled that I get to call you Slingshot and you get to call me Nightmare going forward.
Nightmare. Hopefully I don't see you in my dreams.
Hey, by the way, next one I'm busting to see is Elvis.
Busting to see it. Out this weekend, by the way.
I think it's like a 3-hour movie, though. I'm going to have to really reserve a whole afternoon for it.
Baz Luhrmann, I don't care. Australian director, absolutely chuffed to pieces that he's released a new one. And we all probably watched Romeo and Juliet in high school, which was the Baz Luhrmann one. So the more recent one, and God, it was good.
All right, you got to catch a flight to Adelaide. I'll let you go.
I do indeed.
Week.
I'm out of here. Zoomies. Thanks for listening to another episode of The Double Shot with your favourite cousins, Alex and James Fitzgerald. If you've got a burning question or something we absolutely need to talk about on the pod, please write to us. Both of our emails are in the show notes. For little real estate tidbits and a little bit of banter, a lot of banter, you can follow us on the gram. Our handle is thedoubleshot.podcast. That, my friends, is thedoubleshot.podcast. Until next time, think of us when you sit back and sip your next double shot.